Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. Yuki Saisui stared blankly at the template on the panel in front of him, his eyes devoid of light. He was a transmigrator. The how and why of his transmigration were completely unknown. All he remembered was casually blurting out, "We players are just too skilled," and the next thing he knew, he had become a newborn baby. His parents named him Yuki Saisui. Originally, life was peaceful. But tragedy struck when he turned 3. His parents, both Chunin, died in an unexpected accident during a mission. And so, Saisui became an orphan at the age of 3. Fortunately, they had left behind a decent inheritance along with substantial death benefits. On top of that, due to his young age, he also received a monthly government allowance. It wasn't enough to make him rich, but it was more than sufficient to support him until graduation. Thanks to his persistent arguments, and the fact that children in the shinobi world mature early, he wasn't sent to an orphanage. A 3-year-old living alone would be shocking in most worlds. But in the Naruto universe, where 6-year-olds go to war, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. Still, at the moment, Saisui looked a little down. That morning, a sudden ding echoed in his mind. His cheats had finally awakened. Perhaps it was because Yuki Saisui had been a dedicated Naruto mobile game player in his previous life, but his cheats took the form of a duel arena. It worked almost like instinct, just a thought, and he could pull someone into a duel space. The two would fight, and the winner would gain a boost in chakra. Any damage sustained inside would disappear upon leaving. Even death inside the arena didn't have real consequences. It was essentially a perfect tool for combat training. There was, however, one crucial difference: activating combat mode in the duel arena meant death would be real. Along with the arena, there was also a recruit feature. If Saisui managed to win 20 duels in a month, he'd receive 10 recruitment scrolls. The recruited ninjas were ranked as S rank, A rank, B rank, C rank. Recruitment rates: S rank 0.01%, A rank 0.1%, B rank 9.89%, C rank 90%. When he saw these odds, Saisui had zero expectations for pulling any S or A rank ninjas. Curse those greedy gacha games, no way would he be that lucky. Still, the duel arena had some mercy. At startup, it gave him a starter ninja pack, guaranteed to contain at least one ninja. The result: Yuki Saisui pulled the mighty 7th Hokage. Uzumaki Naruto, Ninja Academy student. Skills: Rasengan, Clone Jutsu, Chance of Failure, Sexy Jutsu. I'll make everyone acknowledge me. He. Amazing. This is amazing. I got the 7th Hokage as my starter. I should have guessed. Of course they'd give out the 7th Hokage as a gimmick. But wait, why is my version just a ninja student? Staring at the Uzumaki Naruto template in his panel, Saisui considered his options. He only knew the basic chakra refinement technique, so while this template was pretty underwhelming, at least it came with the clone jutsu, even if it could fail. So this is the power of the great 7th. What a strong body. As the template merged with him, Saisui could feel power welling up from within. Two techniques, clone jutsu and sexy jutsu, imprinted themselves in his mind, and even the hand movements for Rasengan came to him instinctively. Eyes lighting up, Saisui quickly began forming hand signs. Ever since he realized he'd been reincarnated into the world of Naruto, he had practiced his hand seals diligently. His fingers moved with impressive dexterity. Clone jutsu. With a small puff of smoke, a limp clone flopped face down on the ground, but in the air. Seeing the sorry state of the clone, Saisui couldn't help but mutter, "As expected of you, 7th Hokage-sama." Bang, bang, bang. Just then, a series of loud knocks at the door jolted Saisui out of his daze. Chill. You're gonna break the door. Saisui, what took you so long to open up? As he opened the door, he was met with a head of bright blonde hair. It was none other than the future 4th Hokage. Right away, Saisui heard Minato complaining. Like Saisui, Namikaze Minato was also a war orphan. The two had bonded over their shared circumstances. We start school tomorrow. We need to train hard today too. Ever since they met, Minato had been dragging him out every morning for training. Saisui was more than happy to go along. After all, this was the man destined to become the Yellow Flash. But today was different. His duel arena had awakened. After a moment of thought, Saisui pulled Minato inside, sneakily checked both sides to make sure no one was around, shut the door, and whispered, "Minato, I think I awakened a special ability." Huh? Minato scratched his head in confusion. What kind of special ability? Saisui grinned and grabbed both of Minato's hands. Duel arena. Activate. Their consciousness flickered. Minato blinked as the scenery around him shifted completely. Wah! Looking around at the strange new environment, Minato let out a startled cry. But when he saw Saisui beside him, he calmed down. Where are we? This, Saisui spread his arms dramatically, is the duel arena. My world. At the same time, he looked around curiously at himself. This was his first time stepping into the duel arena as well. The arena was vast, with no walls or visible boundaries. Aside from the enormous stone floor underfoot, there was nothing else, no structures, no scenery. Just endless space. After learning how recruitment scrolls worked, Saisui had decided to disguise the duel arena as a Kekkei Genkai. It was the perfect time to do so. The third Hokage was still sharp, the legendary Sannin were all around, and while Danzo was extreme, he hadn't yet become the madman of the future. Pretending to be a new bloodline limit user was a relatively safe play. After all, Konoha gaining a new bloodline clan was better than not having one. Duel arena, Minato echoed, glancing around in amazement. Saisui nodded. This ability just showed up this morning. From now on, we can train here to gain real combat experience. He then explained the mechanics of the duel arena to Minato. After listening, Minato's eyes lit up with excitement. You mean we can duel here, die, and just wake up in the real world with no side effects? Exactly, Saisui confirmed with a nod. And even better, the muscle memory we gain here carries over to the real world. Though training without fighting doesn't yield any results, he added with a hint of regret. Of course, the duel arena wasn't that simple. But as long as he showed it as just a training tool, that was enough. Just the ability to pull someone into a one-on-one battle was already wild enough, not to mention there was a gacha mechanic. Reveal a bit, keep most hidden, that's the way to survive. Thinking this, Saisui grinned back and returned the thumbs up. So, Minato, how about we have a thrilling, action-packed duel? Minato touched the pouch at his waist, nodded, and drew a wooden kunai, gripping it in a reverse hold. He leaned forward slightly, facing Saisui. Saisui mirrored his posture. Since their training lacked any formal system, Saisui often taught Minato techniques he remembered from his past life, drills, stances, and sparring tricks he'd picked up from videos. Like now, their fighting stances were coiled and ready, poised to launch forward in an instant. That explosive takeoff motion was something he'd internalized deeply. Their kunai were wooden replicas sold at the ninja tool store, modeled after real ones at a 1:1 scale. They were much lighter, but affordable, and more than enough for kids their age. Saisui looked at Minato and asked, "Are you ready?" Minato gave a confident, "Yeah." The moment Saisui triggered the duel with a thought, a countdown timer appeared in midair between them, and an invisible force held them in place. 3, 2, 1. The instant the countdown hit 0, Minato sprang forward like a hunting leopard, kunai in hand, slashing at Saisui's chest. Saisui didn't move a muscle until the last second. Then, he stepped back to evade and instantly lunged forward in return, swiping his kunai at Minato's arm. But Minato reacted swiftly, rolling to the side before launching a sweeping kick. It missed, but still, he panted lightly and said with a grin, "Not bad. We may be opponents now, but you've improved a lot." Anime and manga. He charged again, but then abruptly stopped. Above Saisui's head, a Pat head, emoji appeared. Saisui kept a straight face, but inside, he was cracking up. Wait, the duel arena supports emojis. Amazing. Seeing Minato pause, Saisui smirked and dashed forward. Konoha's secret technique. 1,000 years of death. Minato flinched at the words. He had experienced that jutsu before and still had PTSD, but then his eyes sharpened with resolve as he charged. Not this time, Saisui. I won't lose. Lie down and accept your fate, Minato. They clashed in the center, wooden kunai meeting midair, each going for the other's vital points. But Minato hesitated for a split second. Saisui seized the moment and stabbed him in the side. Minato yelped in pain. Even though the kunai were wooden, they were made well enough to be sharp, and sharp enough to hurt. Saisui didn't hesitate. He thrust his kunai toward Minato's neck. Minato tried to dodge, but it was too late. Everything went black for him. In the next moment, he found himself back in Saisui's room. Minato instinctively touched his neck, no wound. He turned toward Saisui with a mixture of awe and betrayal. It was his first time in the duel arena. Even though Saisui had explained there was no risk of death, some part of him still hesitated. That hesitation had cost him combat sports. Still, the duel made it clear, Saisui wasn't lying about his special ability. Minato muttered, impressed, that's an amazing ability. He could tell Saisui was stronger than before. Much stronger. Normally, their matches were even. Minato had quicker reflexes, while Saisui had raw strength. Their win rate was basically 50-50. But today, the gap was obvious. So this is the power-up from a special ability. Minato wasn't stupid. He knew the village had people with inherited powers, Kekkei Genkai, they called it. But he never imagined his childhood friend would have one too. Meanwhile, Saisui was quietly celebrating the new chakra circulating in his body. He had loaded the Uzumaki Naruto Academy student template, not Naruto's chakra, but his physical potential and basic jutsu. Winning a duel increased his chakra. Unfortunately, only victories against ninja featured in the mobile game gave him chakra gains. The good news: most characters from the original series had been in the game at some point. That meant as long as he defeated canonical characters, his chakra would increase and count toward his duel arena wins. For example, winning against people like Namikaze Minato or Kushina Uzumaki would grant chakra. Beating anyone else would just count as a win. This match with Minato helped him estimate the chakra boost. Since he didn't inherit Naruto's chakra from the template, just winning gave him 1% chakra. Not much, but it was consistent, and could be stacked over time. One day, my chakra reserves will rival a tailed beast's. Just wait. Minato, curious, asked, you didn't overuse your chakra, did you? Saisui shook his head. Nah, the duel arena only uses around 1% of my total chakra. Damn, that's efficient. Minato looked a little envious. A low-cost ability that also trained combat skills. That was insanely good. He pouted for a second, then his eyes lit up again. Next time, I'm winning for sure. Saisui slung an arm over his shoulder with a wide grin. Relax, relax. When I become Hokage, you'll be my advisor. Minato froze for a second before shouting, bastard. I'm becoming Hokage. You can be my advisor. Sure, you be Hokage, Saisui said with a smirk, then suddenly remembered a legendary scene. If Minato really did become Hokage one day, and he stood beside him as advisor, would it happen just like that? Anime and manga. He straightened up, put on a dramatic expression, and growled, Minato, hand him over to me. Then, imitating Minato's tone, he replied to himself. Impossible, Saisui. What are you talking about? Minato frowned, disgusted. That was so cringe. You wouldn't get it, Saisui said, shaking his head solemnly. That was a classic moment. Minato didn't understand at all, but he was used to Saisui acting weird sometimes. I heard the third Hokage is giving the opening speech. I can't wait. What's there to look forward to? Yuki Saisui scoffed, curling his lip. It's not like you haven't heard it before. Minato's face turned bright red as he argued back, it's not the same. Before, we were eavesdropping. Tomorrow, we'll be listening to fair and square. Alright, let's go train already. Yuki Saisui dragged Minato out of the room. He lived near the Forest of Death, and on the outskirts of the forest, the two had cleared out a patch of land to create a simple training ground. The streets were still relatively quiet, it was early, but the vendor stalls lining the sides were already open for business. As the boys passed, many greeted them warmly. Training again, Minato, Saisui, you two are really dedicated. One fruit vendor uncle grinned and tossed them each a piece of fruit. These are from a fresh batch. Give them a try. Thank you, Uncle Yamamoto. Minato beamed as he accepted the fruit. Saisui wiped his with his sleeve, took a bite of the apple, then gave Yamamoto a thumbs up with a grin. Thanks, Uncle. It's sweet. Haha, I'm glad you like it. Yamamoto laughed heartily at their reactions. We'll be heading out now, Uncle. Alright, I'll save some for you two when you come back later. Got it. Saisui called back as he grabbed Minato and broke into a run toward the training ground. Saisui had been an orphan since the age of 3. All he knew was how to wear a smile and speak kindly. If Minato was like a little sun, whose warm smile could heal others, then Saisui was someone who brought joy through his words and cheerful demeanor. Because of that, everyone around them liked the pair. Every now and then, people would bring them snacks or little gifts. As they arrived at the training ground, a man in a bright green jumpsuit greeted them with a thumbs up. Young men, we meet again. This is youth. Saisui looked at Might Dai, then at Minato, who also returned a thumbs up with a brilliant smile. Has Minato already caught the Might Bug? Saisui gave Might Dai a thumbs up too and grinned. A day without dancing is a day wasted. Well said. Might Dai looked at Saisui, eyes brimming with tears. This is youth. Now, 100 laps around the village. If you can't do that, 5,000 one-handed push-ups. With that, he sprinted off to begin his workout. Well then, Minato stared after the shrinking figure of Might Dai, at a loss for words. Minato, Saisui said, patting his shoulder, never underestimate any man. He's the embodiment of youth. Alright, Minato nodded, starting his training with renewed focus. As he watched Minato, Saisui held back one final comment. Might Dai wasn't just the embodiment of youth, he was its very father. But there was no point in saying that now. Minato, let's see who masters healing techniques first. Alright, Minato responded with enthusiasm. Chakra refinement wasn't taught until after enrollment, but Saisui had learned it early. His parents had been Chunin, and left behind some jutsu scrolls, including one for chakra refinement. Ninja clans had special heritage elixirs, allowing them to start refining chakra as early as age 3. Chakra was the result of perfectly merging spiritual and physical energy. He and Minato didn't have any of those special elixirs, so even though they had the chakra refinement technique, they had resisted using it early to avoid damaging their bodies. Thankfully, they had recently succeeded in refining chakra. It was a bit later than the clans, but still much earlier than most civilians. Minato began practicing tree climbing, while Saisui sank his consciousness into the duel arena. It was free summon time. With a thought, the summon interface appeared before him. The first thing he saw was Uchiha Sasuke, Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, and beside him, a towering Susanoo. Sasuke held a black flame-wreathed long blade, the Amaterasu flickering in the wind. Below him were 2 A-ranked ninja and a group of B-ranked ones. Beneath that, 2 buttons glowed. Free summon. Tenfold summon. Saisui focused his thoughts. A swirling flame ignited in the air and began to spiral. The next second, a white flash erupted, and then, a dark, ugly lump of metal dropped in front of him. Just like in a mobile game, this summon had 1 free pull per year. And his first free summon gave him a lump of black metal. TCH. What trash. He tossed it to the ground. Congratulations. You've obtained chakra conductive metal. Huh. Saisui blinked, quickly picking the lump back up. I almost threw away a hidden treasure. I wouldn't mind getting more of this next time. The chunk of metal was about the size of 2 forearms, but surprisingly light. Chakra conductive metal, a rare material that could efficiently conduct, enhance, and preserve chakra. In the original story, Asuma Sarutobi's trench knives were made from this stuff. They were worth a whopping 50 million ryo. 15 million more than Saisui's own bounty. The piece he summoned was thick enough to forge more than 10 pairs of trench knives. I've struck gold. Saisui's eyes sparkled as he lovingly caressed the dark metal. It could easily be turned into a long blade and a short one, with some left over. Hey, Saisui, what are you doing? Minato had been about to start climbing when he noticed Saisui hadn't joined him, and came back, only to find him hugging a chunk of metal. Ah, nothing. Saisui shook his head and carried the metal over. Let's begin. Chakra control was critical for any ninja. Saisui knew that better than most. They had already learned tree walking and water walking some time ago, so now they were working on healing techniques, which demanded even more precise chakra control. Instead of just walking on trees, their training now involved leaping between the trunks of over 20 trees in the area. Saisui glanced at Minato and sighed. Truthfully, he had already mastered the family's jutsu techniques. But when he saw Minato's determined face, he decided to stick around and train alongside him. Minato looked curiously at the chunk of metal in Saisui's hands but didn't pry. With his usual bright smile, he said, I think I can get the advanced version of tree walking down today. He looked toward the tree trunks surrounding them, their bark covered with scratches, proof of their past training. At the base of the trees were thick mats the two had placed for safety. Getting injured would mean days without training, and that just wouldn't do. The techniques for climbing trees and walking on water were clearly explained in the anime. They involved manipulating the chakra's repulsive and attractive forces to adhere to surfaces via the soles of one's feet. It allowed one to stand upright on a tree trunk or walk across water. This was also an effective method to train chakra control. The two of them fell and got back up repeatedly. Even Might Dai, who was still running laps around the village, would pass by occasionally. Each time he saw their dedication, his eyes would weld up with tears and he'd shout, "That's the power of youth." The next morning, Minato walked down the village street, cheerfully greeting people along the way. "Good morning, Minato," an old lady called out with a kind smile. "Good morning, Grandma Aimi," Minato replied with his usual brilliant grin. In the soft morning sunlight, his golden hair shimmered, and he looked like a small sun himself, warming everyone around him with his radiant presence. "Off to find Saisui again?" she asked warmly. "Yup." Minato nodded firmly. He made it a habit to pick up Saisui every morning for training. At first, it was just a few wake-up calls, but over time, it became routine since Saisui had trouble getting up early. "Saisui might not be home right now," Grandma Aimi said, patting Minato's spiky hair. "I saw him heading toward the blacksmith's shop earlier. You should try it there." "Okay." Minato nodded again. Now that she mentioned it, he remembered Saisui saying something yesterday about forging a pair of blades. He had completely forgotten. "Thanks, Grandma Aimi. I'll go find him now." With that, he ran off toward the blacksmith's. Grandma Aimi chuckled and shook her head. That boy. By the time Minato arrived, Saisui was just stepping out of the shop. Surprised to see him, Saisui blinked and asked, "Minato, you came just in time. What kind of blade do you want?" He grabbed Minato by the arm and pulled him back inside. "I was planning to make a second blade identical to mine, but since you're here, we can forge it to your liking." Minato looked around, a little puzzled. The shop was small but fully equipped. "Uncle Hayata, I'm back again," Saisui called out. The blacksmith looked up from his work, set down his hammer, and grinned. "Back so soon, Saisui? My friend's here. Let's base the second blade on what he wants." "Is that so?" Hayata looked at Minato and nodded. "Sure thing." Minato was still a bit lost, but then he followed Saisui's gaze and spotted the block of metal near the forge. it was the same black lump from yesterday. Uncle Hayata had no objections. After all, customers came first. And one who casually brought in a chunk of chakra-conductive metal. That was practically a godsend. As someone aspiring to become a master smith, this was an irresistible opportunity. Noticing the confusion on Minato's face, Saisui chuckled and said, "Don't underestimate Uncle Hayata. He's a man destined to become a legendary master." Ha ha ha. You've got an eye for talent, Saisui. Uncle Hayata laughed heartily, then turned to Minato. Minato, don't worry, I've never had a bad review on any ninja tool I've made. He puffed up with pride. Even some Jonin buy their gear from me. Whoa, cool, Minato exclaimed. I'd just like to kunai, please. In Minato's mind, Saisui might have had some inheritance, but he still needed to be careful with money. Since Minato had saved up a bit himself, he figured he'd pay for his own gear and give Saisui the money later. Kunai? Hayata rubbed his chin and nodded. Sure. Come pick them up in 3 days. Thanks, Uncle Hayata. Saisui gave a satisfied nod, thanked Hayata, and then he and Minato left together, heading for the Ninja Academy. It was only a little past 7 in the morning, and classes started at 9. Along the way, they bought a few sticks of tricolored dango and snacked as they walked. Minato suddenly asked curiously, "Hey, Saisui, why did you decide to have your gear forged? Can't you just buy stuff from a ninja tool shop?" It was a fair question. Most ninjas bought their tools from established stores. Commissioning a custom piece was more of a niche practice. But Saisui didn't explain. Instead, he smiled mysteriously. You'll see soon enough. Chakra-conductive weapons were far superior to ordinary ones. Eventually, the two arrived at the Ninja Academy. Having already passed the entrance assessment, all they had to do now was wait for class assignments and attend the entrance ceremony. Standing on the school's open field, Saisui and Minato stayed side by side while the other students grouped off into clusters here and there. Where the will of fire burns, the leaves of Konoha will never stop dancing. This flame will light our village and nurture new growth. The third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, stood on a high platform delivering his speech. But while his peers were fired up by the will of fire, Saisui harbored a different ideal in his heart. The will of the pot. The first pot cage had a philosophy of modesty and hidden strength, one who remained in the shadows to protect the village quietly. Like a pot in every home where smoke rises, it burns with hidden flame to bring warmth and happiness, even as it becomes blackened and could never be washed clean. That was the will of the pot. Though, at this point in time, the pot cage hadn't fully turned to the dark side yet, right? Saisui mused internally, but on the outside, he looked every bit the wide-eyed new student inspired by the third's words. If you didn't know any better, you'd think he was just another impressionable youth soaking up Konoha's ideals. Around him, the fresh batch of students were all stirred with excitement. Like Saisui, they wore faces filled with awe and determination. But compared to them, Saisui and Minato stood out clearly. They carried themselves with maturity beyond their age. Hiruzen noticed the two of them more than once during his speech and thought to himself. Looks like the new leaves have started to grow. Sensei, I'll take Konoha to even greater heights. When he looked at Minato, Sarutobi couldn't help but think of Jiraiya. So this is the orphan Jiraiya brought back. He's growing up well. Indeed, Minato was taken in by Jiraiya, and his surname had even been chosen by the Sannin himself. As the speech ended, Minato exhaled a breath of relief. Turning to Saisui, he asked, "Hey, Saisui, do you think we'll be placed in the same class?" "Probably," Saisui replied uncertainly. "But even if we're not, we both gave it our all during the assessment. No regrets either way. Let's just do our part and let the rest be up to fate. Come on, let's go." HMPH. Nearby, a boy with a clan crest on his shirt glanced at the two of them and gave a cold snort before walking off. Minato and Saisui exchanged confused glances but didn't think too much of it. The class assignment lists had been posted at the academy gate, and by the time they arrived, a crowd had already gathered. Fortunately, they didn't have to squeeze in with the others. The list at the very top wasn't blocked, and their names were clearly visible. Saisui scanned the list carefully, trying to find familiar names, but to his disappointment, there weren't many. Aside from Namikaze Minato, the only names that rang a bell were the older generation of Inoshika Cho and people like Shibi Aburame. Kushina Uzumaki's name wasn't there, she likely hadn't arrived in Konoha yet. That's great. Minato beamed with joy as he turned to Saisui. We're in the same class. Don't be so cold. Come on, smile. Alright, let's go inside. Saisui gave a helpless smile. Is Minato getting a little clingy? Touching his chin thoughtfully, Saisui mulled over the idea. Maybe it's time to find Minato a little girlfriend, otherwise, I'm afraid he'll start looking at me funny. While waiting for the teacher to arrive, Saisui leaned toward Minato. Hey Minato, want to try something exciting? Something that'll really get your blood pumping. Minato was caught off guard. Something about that phrasing felt off, but he still nodded. Okay. Minato had always been jealous of Saisui's personal duel arena. It let him train or spar anywhere, anytime. Even though Saisui never explained the full details, Minato had guessed its function pretty well. Inside, you could stay for up to 6 hours without fighting, perfect for solo ninjutsu training. It was like having your own portable training ground. With that in mind, the world around Minato blurred, and when his vision cleared, he was inside the duel arena again. Just as he remembered, it was vast and lifelike. Even though it was his second time here, he still couldn't help but explore a little. He knelt down and tapped the ground. It was hard and solid, just like real terrain. Language resources. Minato, ready or not, I'm coming for you. Bring it on. This time, I won't lose. As soon as the countdown finished, the two charged at each other. Since neither of them knew any ninjutsu or had ninja tools, the fight devolved into hand-to-hand combat that looked like two ordinary kids brawling. In no time, they were both bruised and swollen. Still, with the strength boost from the 7th Hokage's template, Saisui was just a bit stronger in taijutsu. He soon pinned Minato to the ground. Looking at Minato's swollen face, Saisui burst out laughing. Pig-head Minato, I will win again. With a final punch, he knocked Minato out cold. As soon as they exited the duel arena, Minato clutched his neck and gasped for air. That was terrifying. Clenching his fists, he declared, next time, I'm definitely going to beat you, no matter how much harder I have to train. Saisui swallowed hard. Honestly, the match had been a close call. Minato nearly got him with a sneaky low blow. Just thinking about that near miss made him break into a cold sweat. Even if the duel arena didn't leave real injuries, it did transmit pain, and he had no desire to experience what it felt like to have his eggs scrambled. Remembering his own last move, Saisui touched his chin and looked at Minato. Minato, want to learn that jutsu I used at the end? Minato's face turned bright red. He stammered, I'm not learning that. Really? Saisui grinned. In that final moment, he had used the 7th Hokage's iconic technique, sexy jutsu, transforming into a female version of Minato to catch him off guard and clinch the win. I worked hard to develop that jutsu. I call it sexy jutsu. Just think, if you're in a real fight and you create a clone to cast it, and your opponent is stunned even for a second, it could literally save your life. Seriously. Minato still looked doubtful, but after giving it some thought, he actually found the idea kind of logical. Alright, I'll give it a try. Good. Come to my room tonight. I'll teach you the sexy jutsu. Okay. Minato nodded, though he still added awkwardly, you really are a genius, Saisui, though this particular jutsu is a little. Seeing his embarrassed look, Saisui chuckled to himself. Poor kid. If only you knew that your future son would be the one to perfect this move, you'd probably faint on the spot. Still, Saisui felt a twinge of frustration. He had drawn the Naruto template, but Minato was already catching up so quickly. He'd hoped to at least dominate him for a month. No wonder this guy became the fourth Hokage. That talent is no joke. Minato had called Saisui a genius, but Saisui knew better. His own talent was average at best, his progress was mostly thanks to his cheats. Just then, their homeroom teacher walked in and cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. Language resources. He scanned the room, then said, "Good morning, everyone. I'll be your homeroom teacher for the next few years. Let's start with some introductions. I'll go first. My name is Yamanaka Yukio. I like flowers and plants, dislike pests, and my dream is to become a great teacher." After finishing his intro, he looked at the front row and smiled. "Alright, let's start from the first row." He turned to a boy with the Uchiha clan's fan crest on his back. "My name is Uchiha Ya." Ya sat down immediately after, making Yamanaka Yukio a bit speechless. He hadn't realized the first student would be an Uchiha, famous for their cold and proud personalities. Thankfully, the second student was a bit more expressive. "My name is Hyuga Tasuki. I like sparrows flying free in the mountains, and I hate the people who try to catch them. I don't have a dream." Okay, maybe not that normal. He beamed brightly, the very picture of a cheerful, sunny boy. Watching him, Yuki Saisui gave an approving nod. Honestly, this was less of a self-introduction and more of a chance to craft your persona. Set your image well, and worries won't catch you. After Minato stepped down, Saisui walked up with a grin and said, "I'm Yuki Saisui. I like patting heads, and I hate people who pat mine." His expression then turned serious, his tone resolute. "I'm a man who will become Hokage. I will be Hokage. You wish. I'm the one who'll be Hokage." A spiky-haired boy with face paint suddenly slammed his desk and stood up, glaring at Saisui with eyes burning with passion. Saisui recognized him. He'd introduced himself earlier as Inuzuka Ryo, a member of the Inuzuka clan. Like both Saisui and Minato, he too dreamed of becoming Hokage. Saisui paused, then snapped back, "Keep dreaming. When I become Hokage, I'll make you an advisor." Then, as if realizing it might come off poorly, he added, "Same goes for Minato." Hearing this from below, Minato's face darkened. "Gee, thanks, you get to be Hokage, and I get to be your advisor." "I'll be Hokage. You can be the advisor." Ryo shot back. Yamanaka Yukio slapped his forehead, clearly exasperated. This was supposed to be the self-introduction segment, not a Hokage debate stage. "Next," he barked, rapping his knuckles on the desk to quiet them down. Saisui chuckled awkwardly and went back to sit beside Minato, while Ryo gave a dismissive snort and muttered under his breath, "I'm the one who'll become Hokage." Meanwhile, in the Hokage's office, Sarutobi Hiruzen set down his crystal ball, a small smile curling on his lips. "Yuki Saisui, it seems the will of fire has indeed been passed on." But then his expression shifted, becoming oddly lecherous. "Now then, time to patrol the village and check on public safety." Unaware that he'd caught the Hokage's attention, Saisui left the classroom. With introductions over, the school day came to an end. Today was just the opening ceremony, a chance for everyone to meet. Real classes will start tomorrow. Textbooks had already been distributed. Walking home with books in hand, both Saisui and Minato flipped through their Ninja Academy materials. So the third Hokage is considered the strongest Hokage, huh? Minato flipped through the history textbook, which detailed the achievements of Sarutobi Hiruzen. Saisui glanced over at him and said nothing, though above his own head, a small, head pat, emoji suddenly popped up. It was one of the visual effects from the Duel Arena system. Any ninja who had entered the Duel Arena could have floating emojis displayed over their heads, a strange, almost comical function. Though unfortunately, Saisui only had 3 emoji options: handshake, head pat, and funny face. Minato blinked at the image. "What's that?" Saisui smirked and popped up another, the funny face emoji, which looked infuriatingly smug. "It's one of the features of my ability. You'll be able to use them too once you're in there. Really? Minato rubbed his chin thoughtfully. For some reason, the head pat emoji made him feel weirdly offended. This Will of Fire explained textbook is kind of amazing, Saisui said, flipping his copy. It's the will of the village. Minato said proudly, lifting his chin. Saisui just stared at him blankly. What's it got to do with you, though? But he kept the thought to himself. The textbook was basically a single motto padded with story after story about how various ninja lived out the will of fire. To Saisui, it all felt like lofty, hollow propaganda. But in this world, where literacy wasn't widespread, such texts were widely respected. Closing the book, Saisui turned to Minato. Minato, I'm heading home first. Come by tonight. Huh. Minato blinked, then nodded. All right, I'll stop by your place tonight. After they parted ways, Saisui walked down the road, book in hand, flipping through pages as he went. To onlookers, he looked like a devoted student of the Will of Fire. Basking in approving glances from passers-by, Saisui arrived home and sat down at his desk, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Though it had looked like he was reading the textbook earlier, he'd actually been deep in thought. He didn't harbor any hatred toward the world. He didn't seek revenge or want to save humanity. He just wanted to live a peaceful life. But in the ninja world, peace required strength. Right now, the Second Great Ninja War hasn't ended yet. Fortunately, Konoha wasn't yet throwing kids into the battlefield. That meant he still had 4 to 5 years of relative safety. Currently, the Ninja Academy graduates students at age 10, not 12 like in later generations. With that in mind, Saisui picked up his pen and started scribbling. If someone looked over his shoulder, they'd see the title written at the top of the page. Reflections on the Will of Fire. This wasn't a personal diary, this was a performance. Saisui was writing with the potential reader in mind. In Konoha, the safest strategy was to present yourself as a model citizen, a loyal leaf of the Will of Fire. He called this approach emergency disguise mode. Right now, Danzo was only starting to show signs of darkness. The third Hokage wasn't senile yet. So relatively speaking, this was one of the safest windows of time. When Saisui finally looked up again, the sky outside was already dark. The sun had disappeared, leaving only streaks of crimson clouds in the distance. Looking at the stack of pages he'd written, Saisui nodded in satisfaction. I've still got it. One single line of thought had led to over 10 pages of writing. Just then, a knock came at the door. Saisui tucked the reflections safely away and opened it. Language resources. Minato stepped in, carrying a bento box. Seeing how dark the room was, he sighed and handed the box over. I knew you wouldn't have eaten. I made this for you. Hurry up and eat. Yuki Saisui chuckled but didn't say anything. Instead, he got to work on the meal in front of him. Once he'd eaten his fill, Saisui turned to Minato with a serious expression. This is the first original jutsu I've ever created, he said solemnly. I'm entrusting it to you now. Treat it well. Anime and manga. Minato raised a brow, clearly skeptical, but didn't protest. He simply waited for Saisui to continue. Seeing Minato's reaction, Saisui smirked and activated the duel arena. There were 5 hours left before midnight. His plan was simple. Teach Minato the sexy jutsu, then defeat him in a duel to secure a win for the day. That was the real reason he'd asked Minato to come over tonight. As long as they exited the duel arena after midnight, the system would count it as a win for the new day. There were no limitations to how many times the duel arena could be used, but only the first match of the day counted toward progress. The rest were just for practice. As Saisui activated the arena, Minato was pulled in. It's already dark, so let's do our training here, Saisui said. Alright, Minato nodded. Saisui then began to explain the principles behind the sexy jutsu. Minato sat cross-legged, listening attentively. The technique wasn't particularly complicated. In essence, it was just a modified transformation jutsu. It had originally been invented by Naruto Uzumaki while he was still in the academy. How hard could it be? With Minato's talent, it only took 2 verbal explanations and a single demonstration from Saisui for him to get it. Sexy jutsu. Minato formed the hand seals and shouted. A puff of smoke rose, and suddenly, a female version of Yuki Saisui stood before him, curves in all the right places, revealing just enough to tease the imagination. You bastard! Why would you transform into me? Saisui shouted, instantly regretting teaching the jutsu. Minato reverted to his original form, a bit embarrassed. Didn't you say the transformation works best when you're familiar with the person? Anime and manga. He crossed his arms, growing more confident. I know you the best, so of course I transformed into you. Prepare to die, Saisui roared, drawing a kunai and charging at Minato. You actually brought a kunai? Minato shouted, startled, and immediately took off running. One chased while the other fled, and the two darted all around the duel arena for hours. In the end, Saisui managed to land the final blow, relying on the stamina he'd inherited from stacking with the 7th Hokage. He tackled Minato and jabbed the kunai into him. Finally caught you. Saisui collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. In the next instant, the world spun, and they were both ejected back into reality. They lay there on the floor, still panting. While the duel arena didn't cause any physical exhaustion, their bodies still reacted to the intensity of what they'd just experienced. The sudden transition left both of them feeling drained. Once they recovered, Minato glared at Saisui. I'm not falling for your tricks next time. What was supposed to be a training session had turned into a battle in the arena, with a kunai, no less. What kind of friend is that? It's late. Just stay over tonight, Saisui offered. Sure. Minato nodded. He casually walked over to the cupboard, pulled out 2 futons, and laid them out on the floor with practiced ease. They had known each other for years. Whenever one of them stayed too late at the other's house, they just crashed for the night. Both of them were intimately familiar with each other's homes. Saisui watched Minato finish setting up and let out a long yawn. Well, good night. He flopped onto the bed without another word. Minato shook his head but said nothing. He lay down as well, silently vowing to get Saisui back for this someday. If it had been any normal friend, this might have caused a rift, but not between them. That was the difference between best friends and just friends. Language resources. The next morning, Yuki Saisui slowly opened his eyes, sitting up in bed and beginning his daily ritual of early morning zoning out. A knock on the door jolted him back to reality. I'm coming, he called out. He didn't need to ask who it was. Minato always woke up earlier than him, and he always went out to buy breakfast. As Saisui opened the door, the familiar face of the blonde Minato appeared before him. Here. This is yours, Minato said, handing him the breakfast bag. Minato, you're amazing. If only you were a girl, Saisui teased. Huh. Minato blinked. Then realization dawned. Without saying a word, he calmly took a step back. I need to run back and grab something. See you at school, he called, sprinting off before Saisui could say another word. What's he running for? Saisui muttered, confused, but didn't dwell on it. He cleaned himself up quickly, grabbed his food, and headed for the academy. As he walked, he thought about his gacha system. If he managed to win 20 matches each month, he'd earn 10 recruitment scrolls. Every 10 roll came with a guaranteed Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan Sasuke shard. So in 1 year, he'd get 12 shards. After about 8 years, he'd have the full set and unlock the real deal. That wasn't bad. Not bad at all. After all, what's a little effort when the reward is overwhelming power? As for whether he could win that many battles, well, real life wasn't like a video game where opponents were matched based on level. While he often sparred with Minato, if it looked like he wouldn't meet his monthly quota, he'd just help some weaker students train and rack up wins. He'd turn the duel arena into his own Kekkei Genkai. With the excuse of training his classmates, and the image of being a model student full of the will of fire. He'd craft a perfect public persona, one of a prodigy ninja with strong ideals. The more Saisui thought about it, the more impressed he was with his own brilliance. When he arrived at class, Minato was already seated. Yo, Minato. Hey, Saisui. Their seats were set up for 3 people. Sitting next to them was someone with spiky hair. Huh. Saisui looked at the spiky-haired boy, frowning. This hedgehog looks kinda familiar. You bastard. The boy exploded. I'm your greatest rival on the path to becoming Hokage, and you forgot me. Saisui blinked, and finally remembered the hot-blooded kid from yesterday who'd shouted at him during introductions. Oh, sorry. I just woke up, still a little foggy. Saisui apologized sincerely. Language resources. Forgetting someone was pretty rude, no matter where you were from. This was a new beginning. He had just become a teacher, and this was his first homeroom class. The journey to earning the title of a top-tier instructor would start here. Alright, class is starting now, Yamanaka Yukio announced with a light cough, addressing the students. Please take out your Will of Fire textbooks. Let's begin. Where the leaves dance, the fire lives on. The fire's light. Yuki Saisui was eager to hear what insights the teacher might offer, planning to jot them down in his diary later. But just then, a paper ball flew in from the side. Following its arc, Saisui saw Minato shrug helplessly and gesture toward Inuzuka Ryo, who was shadowboxing beside him. Don't leave after school. You and I are gonna settle this. Seeing the message written on the paper, Saisui chuckled quietly and activated the duel arena. The moment Ryo raised his fist, his surroundings blurred, and he suddenly found himself elsewhere. Minato, watching both of them go still with vacant stares, instantly realized what Saisui had done. He sighed in resignation and turned his attention back to the Will of Fire lecture. Where is this place? Ryo immediately began shouting in confusion as he looked around the unfamiliar space. Keep it down, Saisui muttered, rubbing his ear. You're too loud. Yuki Saisui. Ryo calmed down a little when he recognized his opponent. Looking around again in awe, he asked, is this some kind of genjutsu you cast? Damn it, so you've already gotten this far ahead of me. But I won't lose. I'll become Hokage before you. Hey. Saisui scoffed, an emoji-like image of him patting his head appearing above him. He sneered, keep dreaming. The Hokage title is mine. This place is my ability. Dying here has no real consequences. Go all out, entertain me. As he spoke, Saisui pulled out a wooden kunai and formed the sign of confrontation. You bastard. I'm not giving up. Ryo growled, gritting his teeth. Despite the challenge, he obediently mirrored the sign of confrontation and pulled out a real kunai, ready to fight. Meanwhile, back in the real classroom, Yamanaka Yukio walked up to Saisui and asked him to repeat what he had just said in class. Minato, embarrassed, looked away as if he had nothing to do with what was happening. Yuki Saisui, I'll ask again, what did I just say? Seeing Saisui still sitting there, unresponsive, with a blank stare, Yukio finally lost his patience and slammed his hand on the desk. But all Saisui did was turn and glance at him before silently picking up his textbook and continuing to read. Huh. Yukio frowned. Something was clearly wrong. He turned to look at Ryo, sitting beside Minato, and saw the same dazed expression, though Ryo's was even more vacant. Hiss. Yukio in a breath. Did I bore them into a trance with my lesson? Seeing the teacher's expression, Minato finally spoke up. Sensei, they're dueling. Dueling. Yukio echoed, confused. Just as he said that, both students suddenly snapped back to normal, but Ryo immediately clutched his neck and let out a painful scream. Language resources. Ah, my neck. I'm gonna die. He dramatically tilted his head to the side and passed out from shock. Damn it. Yukio rushed over in a panic to check on Ryo. After a quick inspection, he realized Ryo had simply passed out from fright. He sighed, utterly speechless. He's fine. I just need some rest. Relieved, Yukio turned to Saisui with a stern face. You, come to my office after class. Yes, sir, Saisui replied obediently. After the teacher left, Minato leaned over and whispered, Are you okay? Seeing the concern on Minato's face, Saisui smiled reassuringly. It's fine. The teacher just wants to understand what happened. Nothing serious. He had expected this outcome from the start. Originally, he had only intended to drag Minato into the duel arena, but when Ryo butted in, he simply rolled with it. Saisui needed word of his abilities, as the first possessor of a new bloodline limit, to reach the third Hokage. And the Ninja Academy, being directly under the Hokage's supervision, was the best place to make that happen. When the bell rang, Saisui dutifully followed Yukio to his office. Alright, explain. What kind of genjutsu was that? Yukio asked, still convinced Saisui had used some kind of illusion technique. He had initially thought Saisui was just a naturally gifted genjutsu user. Though surprised by his talent, he hadn't questioned it too deeply. He had decided to finish the lesson and ask Saisui for a post-class demonstration. A personal tutoring session, in a way. But Saisui shook his head. Sensei, it's not genjutsu. This is a unique ability of mine. Yukio furrowed his brow and sat up straighter. Rather than pry into the nature of the ability, he asked calmly, then show it to me. Duel Arena, activate. Without hesitation, Saisui raised his hand and clenched his fist toward Yukio. In the blink of an eye, the teacher was pulled into a surreal, indescribable space. Just a moment ago he'd been in the office, and now, he was standing across from Saisui. Genjutsu release. Yukio instinctively formed the seal to break illusions, but of course, nothing happened. He walked up beside Saisui, visibly intrigued. So this is your special ability? That's right. Saisui nodded. I woke up one day and just had it. I can train here freely, and dying in this space has no real effect. Yukio glanced at him, nodded, and suddenly summoned a kunai. I hope you're telling the truth. He gave Saisui a calm smile, and without warning, plunged the kunai into his own heart. Saisui froze, choking on his words as he stared, speechless, at Yukio's collapsing body. Sensei, you'll be kicked out automatically after 6 hours. The writhing Yukio could barely hold it together upon hearing that. Soon, the two of them returned to reality. Yukio clutched his chest, his face twisted in pain. Saisui stared blankly, unsure how to react. But deep down, he was moved. All that just because I said it was safe. Why, sensei? You could have let me kill myself to prove it. You're my student. Even if it's only our first day of class, I'm the one who wants to understand your power. It's only right that I experience it myself. He paused, then looked Saisui in the eye. And besides, I believe you wouldn't lie to your teacher. Alright, go on back. I need to report this to the Hokage. Yes, sir. In the Hokage's office, Sarutobi Hiruzen sat silently, staring at the crystal ball displaying Yuki Saisui and Minato. His brows were furrowed in deep thought. Just moments ago, Yamanaka Yukian had finished summarizing Yuki Saisui's abilities. Since then, Sarutobi had been in this contemplative state. A first-generation inheritor of a Kekkei Genkei. Just then, the office doors flew open with a loud bang. Shimura Danzo strode in and immediately wrinkled his nose at the heavy cloud of secondhand smoke in the room. Every time I come in here, it's like walking into a chimney. Do you even remember you're the Hokage? He approached the desk and caught sight of Yuki Saisui in the crystal ball, a flash of surprise in his eyes. Root is short on personnel. I want you to transfer a few people to me. It's normal to be short-staffed right after forming a new unit, Sarutobi replied, puffing on his pipe. I'll send over another squad from the Anbu. Danzo's gaze returned to the crystal ball. Then give me those two kids as well. He was referring to Saisui and Minato. He didn't know why Sarutobi was paying attention to them, but he knew from experience, if the Hokage took notice, they were probably prodigies. It was just a casual request, really. If Sarutobi agreed, Great. If not, no big deal. Sarutobi gave Danzo a sideways glance and let out a cold snort. Out of the question. Those two children are newly sprouted leaves bathed in sunlight. Danzo's face twisted in frustration at the immediate rejection. You'll regret this, Hiruzen. Anime and manga. Enough. Sarutobi slammed his hand on the desk and stood up. He was still in his prime, known across the ninja world as the Professor of Ninjutsu, a legendary shinobi. Danzo, I am the Hokage. HMPH. With a snort, Danzo turned and left, the door slamming behind him. Unbothered by the noise, Sarutobi picked up the file on his desk. Name: Yuki Saisui. Age: 6. Parents: Yuki Santo and Yuki Yukiko. History: entered the academy at age 3. Staring at the report and recalling what he had witnessed at the opening ceremony the previous day, Sarutobi thought to himself. So he really is a new leaf carrying the will of fire. I should find time to meet that child. Meanwhile, at the Ninja Academy, Yuki Saisui was attending class as if nothing had happened. He had already made up his mind to reveal his dual arena ability. After all, it wasn't like he could hide it forever. Not using it just wasn't an option. Now was the perfect time to reveal it, publicly. It would just appear to be a training function. As for features like battle mode, chakra enhancement, and card draws, those could remain hidden. He could mask his power growth as something that came solely from the dual arena. By the third period, Inuzuka Ryo had finally regained consciousness. Muttering about how surprised he was to still be alive, he glanced thoughtfully at Saisui. So, that's your special ability. Ryo mumbled to himself, his eyes fixed on Saisui. The heat of battle still burned inside him. Minato, sitting nearby, could almost feel the fire radiating off Ryo. Damn it. Even if that's the case, there's no way I'm giving up. As soon as I learn ninjutsu, you're finished. Martial arts. Saisui completely ignored Ryo's dramatic declaration. He was too busy preparing for the afternoon's practical class. The academy's daily structure was simple. Culture lessons in the morning, combat training in the afternoon. Thankfully, they provided standard ninja tools for the class, which was a relief to Saisui. His homemade wooden tools were barely presentable. The practical session was straightforward, throwing kunai, shuriken, and the like. The next 2 days were filled with a repetitive routine. Wake up, go to class, finish school, go home, train with Minato, and duel at night. Monotonous, but fulfilling. Minato, after school today, come with me to Uncle Hayata's place. Minato nodded, visibly excited. This would be his first time owning real ninja tools. Then he paused, suddenly remembering something. Oh no, I haven't paid you yet. He quickly fumbled in his pocket and pulled out 5,000 ryo. Saisui, here, I don't know how much it costs to craft ninja tools, but this is all the money I have. If it's not enough, I'll pay you the rest later. He scratched his head, embarrassed. Saisui looked at the money, then tapped Minato on the head and handed it back. Keep it for yourself. That metal was chakra infused. You couldn't afford it even if you sold yourself. But I found it, so the leftover materials after making our tools are the payment. I didn't spend a cent. Minato didn't know what chakra metal was, but he sighed in relief upon hearing Saisui hadn't paid either. Still, he insisted, just take it. I don't know what chakra metal is, but it must be really valuable. Otherwise, Uncle Hayata wouldn't have accepted just the scraps as payment. He stuffed the money into Saisui's hands. I don't want to take advantage of you. I'll pay the difference later. Seeing how stubborn Minato was, Saisui reluctantly accepted the money and slipped it into his wallet with a smirk. Fine. But if you ever can't afford to eat, come to my place. If I have a single grain of rice, you won't go hungry. Minato nodded, visibly touched. Anime and manga. Too bad you're not a girl, Saisui added with a dramatic sigh. Then you could repay me with your body. Startled, Minato scooted closer to Inuzuka Ryo for safety. You two sure are close, said a lazy voice from behind. It was Pineapple Head. Hey, aren't the three of us just as close? Saisui turned around in his seat, facing away from the blackboard. I guess you're right. The Pineapple Head was none other than Nara Shikaku. Beside him sat Akamichi Choza and Yamanaka Inoichi, this generation's Ino-Shika Cho trio. Fathers of 3 of the future 12 Guardian Ninja. Also in their class was Aburame Shibi, father of Aburame Shino, another of the future 12. Saisui internally dubbed their class the class of the 12 Titans, because so many parents of the future elite were here. Hey, want to play shogi? Shikaku pulled a set from his desk and waved it at Saisui. Shogi. Saisui shook his head. I don't know how to play. But I do know a more interesting game. Wanna learn? Oh. Shikaku perked up. What kind of game? I'll bring it tomorrow and show you. Just give me a preview. Saisui sighed and gave a quick explanation of chess. Sounds fun, Shikaku said, stroking his chin in interest. I'll go have a set made. That way, you don't have to bring one. Sure, that works. Saisui nodded, not bothered either way. He was pretty good at chess, after all. Want some chips? Choza passed a bag over. Shikaku expertly tore it open and handed it to Saisui. Without hesitation, Saisui began snacking. Yuki Saisui, Nara Shikaku, Namikaze Minato, Akamichi Choza, you 4, out in the hallway, now. Minato, why are you here too? Akamichi Choza asked curiously while munching on a bag of chips. Minato scratched his head awkwardly before answering, I just turned around to check on you guys. That's rough, Saisui commented sympathetically, though his tone was anything but serious. Then, with a sudden change of topic, he looked at the others and said, wanna head to the training grounds? Huh, Minato blinked. But aren't we being punished? We're supposed to stand here, remember? What does the teacher know? This is called balancing work and rest. You guys go train, I'll just supervise, Nara Shikaku chimed in from the side. He exchanged a look with Saisui, and both felt an odd sense of camaraderie. Though one intended to train and the other to slack off, in essence, they were both ditching class. Let's go. I'll show you something interesting. What kind of interesting thing? Choza asked, still munching as Saisui pulled him along. You'll see when we get there. Saisui didn't elaborate further, simply dragging Choza along. Minato stayed behind, glancing at Shikaku. You're coming too. Shikaku nodded. I already know everything they're teaching now. I can always catch up later. Minato thought about it. That was true. The current lessons were just basic literacy and lectures on the will of fire. He and Saisui had already learned all that when they were 4. This time would be better spent training. So, shall we go? Let's. The two nodded and quickly followed after Saisui. Back in the classroom, a faint smile curled at the corner of Yukio's lips. He had known these kids would skip class sooner or later. Better to give them an excuse than keep fighting it. For children from shinobi clans, these lessons were too basic anyway. Looking around at the remaining clan kids, most of whom were spacing out, he sighed. Kicking all of them out would make him look bad, though. This really is a headache. He scratched his head. In the end, he decided to just let it be. If they wanted to skip class, fine. If not, they could stay put. Meanwhile, Saisui led the group straight to the improvised training grounds he and Minato had put together. This is your training ground. Shikaku glanced around, visibly impressed. You guys really pulled this off. Not really. Minato rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Saisui did most of the work, I just helped out a little. Hey, Saisui, where's the interesting thing you mentioned? Choza looked around in confusion. Nothing here seems particularly cool. You'll see, Saisui replied with a mysterious smile. Wanna see the jutsu that knocked Inuzuka Ryo unconscious? You mean the one that scared him so badly he fainted, thinking he was dead? Shikaku muttered lazily as he found a spot and lay down. If it's that jutsu, I wanna see it too, said Choza, curious. Ryo described it like it was some secret technique. Well then, let's all take a look. With a snap of Saisui's fingers, the space around them twisted, and the four boys found themselves standing inside a virtual duel arena. Minato and Saisui stood on one side. On the other side stood Shikaku and Choza. A glowing barrier shimmered between them. Duo battle mode activated. This is your Kekkei Genkai? Shikaku asked, impressed. That's pretty amazing. He tested his shadow possession jutsu. Everything felt the same as in reality. He even tried casting a genjutsu release, but there was no change. Yup. This is really something. Carrying your own training ground around with you, that's enviable. He genuinely meant it. If he had this power, he'd just tell his parents he was training, then come in here and nap to his heart's content. Alright, let's get started on ninjutsu training. You can only leave once you've either died or stayed 6 hours, Saisui said. Go ahead. I'll nap for a bit. Without hesitation, Shikaku lay down again, crossing one leg over the other in utter relaxation. Saisui gave a helpless shrug. Well, he was a Nara. Nothing unusual there. Choza, on the other hand, was excitedly wandering around the arena, checking everything out like a kid in a candy store. Choza, come back. This place has no edge. Saisui shouted as Choza nearly disappeared from sight. A moment later, Choza reluctantly returned. Too bad. I wanted to try my human boulder technique from over there and roll across the whole arena. Huh. Saisui feigned confusion. Human boulder? That's your clan's jutsu? Yup. Choza glanced at the napping Shikaku, then nodded. It's one of our secret techniques, just like the Nara clan's shadow possession and the Yamanaka's mind-body switch. He scratched his head sheepishly and added, the three of our families are called the Ino Shika Cho Trio. Our jutsu can be combined. Ah, so that's why you three are always together. Minato exclaimed in realization. Let's start ninjutsu practice now. Saisui grinned and pulled a scroll from his pocket. As he unrolled it, he explained, while we're in here practicing jutsu, our real bodies outside are also training. We can carry the ninjutsu experience back into reality. No need to worry about danger either. If you feel threatened, your subconscious will take over and fight automatically. You might even perform better than you normally would. There was a hint of helplessness in Saisui's voice. If it were possible, he could have used this as a battlefield tactic, drag enemies in and let someone else finish the job inside. But the system clearly didn't allow for that kind of exploit. The outside body trains too. Shikaku suddenly stood up, his eyes sparkling. Yep. Saisui nodded, a little unsettled by Shikaku's sudden enthusiasm, and took a step back. This is amazing. Shikaku bowed deeply, then said sincerely, from now on, please include me in your training sessions. Saisui. This guy is completely shameless, just wants to train by sleeping. Not that Saisui minded. The duel arena was huge. One more person made no difference. While inside the arena, Saisui could still control his real body, at least enough to avoid the fate of Dan Kato, who was ambushed while using spirit transformation jutsu. As long as battle mode wasn't activated inside the arena, the system would protect his body if danger arose. Feeling his legs wobble slightly, Yuki Saisui muttered under his breath, man, if only there was a foot spa nearby. I'd love a massage. No one seemed to hear his grumbling, but Nara Shikaku was clearly energized as he turned to the group and declared, tomorrow's the weekend, let's keep training. Minato didn't respond, still rubbing his sore calves. Akamichi Choza, however, looked like he'd just seen a ghost. Since when did Shikaku ever suggest training on his own? From the moment they met, Shikaku had to be dragged into training. Now he was volunteering. Hey, full of energy, I see, a voice chuckled from the side. It was Sarutobi Hiruzen, stepping into view with a kind smile as he looked over the group. Ah, Hokage-sama. Minato jumped up, startled, and tried to stand at attention. But his legs gave out from the fatigue, and he nearly collapsed, if not for Saisui catching him just in time. Relax. You all clearly trained hard, Hiruzen said warmly as he gestured for them to sit down. When I was your age, I trained just as diligently. As he walked over to Saisui, he asked, "You must be the child of Santo and Yukiko, correct?" "Yes, sir." Saisui nodded respectfully. "I'm Yuki Saisui. Good child. I heard you awakened a new Kekkei Genkai. Anime and manga. I'm not sure if that's what it is exactly. One day I just woke up with this strange new ability." "Oh, fascinating." Hiruzen's curiosity was piqued. "Could you demonstrate this so-called dual arena for me?" Most Kekkei Genkai are formed from the fusion of two chakra natures, resulting in abilities that affect the body on a genetic level. They're usually powers that can be activated at will. But an ability like Saisui's, one that manifests a separate space like the dual arena, was unheard of in the shinobi world. Hearing the Hokage's request, Saisui hesitated for a moment. After all, exiting the dual arena required either waiting 6 hours or dying once. And dying on purpose wasn't something he was eager to do. Still, there was no point in hiding it. It was better to let the old man experience it for himself. With that in mind, Saisui nodded and raised his hand, making a grasping motion toward empty air. In an instant, both he and Hiruzen vanished into the dual arena. To the others outside, it looked like the two had suddenly gone motionless, silently facing each other without moving. Yet all three remaining boys could feel an invisible pressure radiating from the third Hokage. It was suffocating. Inside the dual arena, Hiruzen examined their surroundings in astonishment. He had braced himself the moment Saisui made that grasping motion, but still got pulled in without any resistance. "This is the dual arena, Hokage-sama," Saisui explained calmly. "A truly remarkable ability," Hiruzen replied with a gentle smile. "Even I couldn't resist being brought here." Then he added with a slight sigh, "It's a pity it doesn't seem useful for combat, only for training." "That alone is more than enough," Saisui responded. "While my physical body trains outside, I can practice ninjutsu here. It's like getting twice the training time." Hiruzen was momentarily stunned, then smiled again. "You're right. I was overthinking it. Saisui, work hard." "I will." Saisui nodded seriously. "I'll become Hokage one day." "Ha ha ha. I'll look forward to seeing you grow," Hiruzen laughed, patting Saisui's head. "Then hurry up and grow strong enough. I'll leave the title of Hokage to you." "Understood." Saisui answered joyfully, looking every bit like a newly brainwashed recruit. "And starting next month, I'll double your and Minato's monthly living allowance. Come by the Hokage's office first to collect it." As if suddenly remembering something, Hiruzen reached into his robes and pulled out a scroll. Smiling warmly, he said, "Here. This scroll contains a jutsu, consider it a gift." Anime and manga. Saisui accepted the scroll and bowed in thanks. "Thank you, Hokage-sama." "Haha. No need to thank me. My own teacher treated us the same way. This is the will of fire. Where the leaves dance, the fire will burn. The fire's shadow will shine upon the village and allow new leaves to grow. You are those new leaves now. Let me ask you this, Saisui, will you inherit the will of fire?" Hiruzen asked solemnly. Saisui knew exactly what to say at a time like this. "I will," he shouted with conviction. "Ha ha ha, good. No need to thank me. After all, you are the future of the village." Saisui stood there trembling, looking as if he'd give his life for this man on the spot. If someone didn't know better, they might just fall for it. Then Hiruzen glanced around again. "This space lasts 6 hours, right?" "Yes, that's correct," Saisui confirmed. "In that case, I'll take a look around." He patted Saisui's head again and said kindly, "Get some rest. I'll be back later." And with that, Hiruzen jogged off into the distance. Watching him disappear into the horizon, Saisui gritted his teeth. "That old geezer, he actually patted my head." An angry emoji seemed to shimmer above his head as he fumed. "One day, I'll pat yours in return." He knew exactly what Hiruzen was up to. Guys like the Third and Danzo would never just accept what someone told them. There was no way Hiruzen would trust him outright. Even now, He was clearly off to test the duel arena's limits on his own, away from Saisui's eyes. Wait until I summon Eternal Mangekyo Sasuke. I'll teach you to respect personal space. No more unsolicited head pats. Saisui pulled up the recruitment interface. He already had 5 wins under his belt. Just 15 more and he'd get 10 recruitment scrolls. Language resources. Please let me get something good, ideally a Kizaru. If I had him, I wouldn't even need ninjutsu, I'd pat the heads of everyone in the entire ninja world. Of course, he knew he was dreaming. Still, with time, everything was possible. Looking at Saisui, Hiruzen gave a warm smile. Not bad at all, Saisui. Your Kekkei Genkei is truly powerful. Though it lacks offensive ability, having a personal training ground at your fingertips is extremely useful. He then turned to the 3 who had been waiting patiently. Work hard, all of you. Konoha's future belongs to you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Once the 3rd Hokage left, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Lord Third is really kind, someone said. Under the starry sky, Minato spoke with determination, I'm going to become Hokage one day. Saisui nodded from the side. I believe in you. He knew Minato, the little son, was destined to be the future 4th Hokage. There was no doubt in his mind. Nara Shikaku sighed and looked up at the stars. It's getting late. We should head back. Yeah, we'll come hang out tomorrow, Saisui. Akamichi Choza said, shoving a handful of chips into his mouth. Sure. Saisui nodded. Come early, we'll go for a picnic. Awesome. I'll bring more snacks. After the 2 left, Saisui finally pulled out the scroll Hiruzen had given him. He had no idea what kind of jutsu the old man had passed on. That's from the Hokage? Minato asked, curiously peeking over at the scroll. Yeah, he said it was a reward. Minato looked a little envious. That's really lucky. No worries, Saisui waved his hand. We'll learn it together. Are you sure that's okay? Minato hesitated. He gave it to you, not me. Before he could finish, Saisui interrupted with a helpless tone. What's the big deal? Jutsu are meant to be learned. Then Saisui pulled out another scroll. Here, this one's for you. It was the wind style. Vacuum sphere, a basic C-rank ninjutsu they'd practiced earlier. One of the few techniques Saisui's family had left behind. There are some notes from my dad in there too. Take a look when you study it. During training, Minato had mostly been practicing the 3 basic techniques, not by choice, but because as an orphaned civilian, he had no access to ninjutsu. Saisui, on the other hand, had inherited a few techniques left behind by his parents, both of whom were chunin before they died in battle when he was 3. They had anticipated this possibility and left behind what they could for their son. Such is the love of a parent. Besides vacuum sphere, there was also wind style, great breakthrough in a healing technique. The wind jutsu were from his father, Yuki Santo, while the healing one came from his mother, Yuki Yukiko, a medical ninja. They even left a scroll on chakra extraction techniques. For civilians, inheriting 3 full ninjutsu scrolls was nothing short of remarkable. Minato accepted the scroll without further protest, then looked at Saisui seriously. I'll return this to you tomorrow. Saisui just smiled. He had already memorized the technique front to back. He could probably write it out from memory on the spot, word for word. Whether Minato returned it or not didn't matter, though if he told him to keep it, Minato probably wouldn't accept it. Alright, now let's see what the 3rd gave me. With a grin, Saisui unrolled the scroll. Minato leaned in curiously. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Saisui blinked. He hadn't expected the old man to give him that AB rank technique, and one he desperately wanted. He had been racking his brain trying to figure out how to obtain it. That's an advanced clone jutsu, right? Yeah. Saisui nodded, then began explaining. The basic clone from the 3 techniques is just an illusion, untouchable, good for visual deception, but useless against sensor-type ninjas. But Shadow Clone Jutsu creates actual physical bodies. And when the clone disperses, the memories go back to the original. Even sensor types can't tell the difference between the clone and the real one. Minato's eyes widened. That's amazing. So you could use it to confuse the enemy, or send the clone as bait. Exactly, Saisui nodded again. But more importantly, when a clone disappears and sends its memories back, think about using that for training. You get double the results. Amazing. Minato was even more excited now. This is a B rank technique though, Minato. Saisui tapped Minato lightly on the forehead, then rolled up the scroll. Let's head to my place. You can copy it there. Are you sure that's okay? Minato asked again, hesitating. It was a gift from the Hokage. He wasn't worried about whether he could learn it, but whether it would cause trouble for Saisui. Don't worry, I already said it's fine. With that, Saisui grabbed his hand and headed home. Meanwhile, in the Hokage's office, Sarutobi Hiruzen watched the scene unfold through his crystal ball and chuckled. He knew about Saisui's bond with Minato. Giving him the shadow clone jutsu was his way of passing it to both of them. It was also a test. If Saisui had not shared the scroll with Minato, Hiruzen might have begun to doubt everything he'd seen in the duel arena. In a world where even 10-year-olds could go to war, 6 and 7-year-olds were not to be underestimated. But now, it was clear. This child truly carried the will of fire. Just then, the door opened without a knock. Hiruzen didn't need to look to know who it was. Language resources. Only 3 people in the village could enter his office so freely. And only Danzo would barge in like that. Let me have the boy named Yuki Saisui, Danzo said without preamble. I'll shape him into one of Konoha's roots. Classic Danzo, straight to the point. He's not suited for root, Hiruzen replied, exhaling a puff of smoke. Not even for the Anbu. He shines too brightly. He belongs in the sunlight. HMPH. The taller the tree, the deeper its roots must go. That's how it grows strong. That little pervert only knows how to peep at women in the bathhouse. He's just like you. Sarutobi Hiruzen flushed slightly, as if his guilty conscience had been exposed. He coughed to cover his embarrassment. Regardless, I'm not handing that child over to you. And besides, I just assigned an entire Anbu squad to you the other day. Don't push your luck. His tone grew increasingly stern, exuding the presence only a seasoned shinobi could possess. Danzo snorted. Then give me that blonde brat beside him. That child was brought back by Jiraiya, Hiruzen replied calmly. He'll be under Jiraiya's care too, so don't even think about it. Seeing all his requests rejected, Danzo furrowed his brows, his tone turning harsh. Then send the Uchiha clan to the Kurigakure front. Hiruzen pondered for a moment, then shook his head. Anime and manga. No, the timing isn't right. You'll regret this, Hiruzen. Having even his suggestion about the Uchiha denied, Danzo roared in frustration. I'm the Hokage, Danzo. HMPH. With another cold snort, Danzo turned and stormed out, the door slamming hard into its frame with a loud bang. Next time you do that, I'm docking funds from your root budget to buy a new door. Hiruzen's voice echoed from the office behind. Danzo paused mid-step, glanced back with a harumph. HMPH. Like I care, I'll just slam it again. Several Anbu hidden in the shadows could only shake their heads. This scene had become a regular performance, especially with that same exchange of lines. Every time Elder Danzo came to see the Hokage, this play would unfold without fail. If it didn't happen, they'd actually suspect Danzo had been replaced and stop him for a body check. The next morning, just as dawn was breaking, Minato arrived and knocked on the door. Anime and manga. Woken up by the knocking, Yuki Saisui rubbed his eyes and opened the door, asking groggily. Minato, why are you here so early? Today's the day of the field trip, remember? Minato said, clearly excited. And it's also the day we get our ninja tools. Honestly, his excitement was understandable. He hadn't seen much of the world yet, and the first time he even touched a real ninja tool was during combat training at the academy. Now, He was about to get his own tools, of course he was thrilled. Looking at Minato, Yuki sighed helplessly. Alright, just wait a bit. I'll wash up first. Minato nodded eagerly. Once Yuki was ready, the two made their way toward the blacksmith shop. As they walked, Yuki munched on a skewer of dango and sighed. Minato, if Uncle Hayata hadn't opened the shop yet, wouldn't this trip be a waste? I checked on the way here, he's already open. Minato replied, barely able to contain his excitement. He was going to give mine to me already, but I said I'd wait and go with you. You really? Yuki didn't know whether to laugh or scold him. Still, seeing Minato like this, he couldn't help but smile. So the future fourth Hokage was once just a cheerful kid too. When they arrived at the smithy, Uncle Hayata was already waiting for them. Seeing the two approaches, he grinned. Yuki, your friend here's a real bro. He gave them a thumbs up. He insisted on waiting until you got here. Minato scratched his head sheepishly. Well, it just felt like the right thing to do. Alright then, Hayata chuckled, and then pulled out two tri-pronged kunai and a jet black tachi sword. Gardening. Here you go, Minato, these are yours, he said, handing over the kunai. These aren't disposable tools, they're forged from chakra-conductive metal. I added double handguards to protect you from enemy weapons sliding down and cutting your hands. Also, I mixed in some wind element minerals to help conduct your chakra more efficiently. They'll hit harder too. Then he urged. Go ahead, Minato, try channeling some chakra into them. Minato blinked. He knew chakra metal was valuable, but this valuable tools that could conduct chakra weren't cheap. He turned to look at Yuki. What are you standing there for? Yuki smiled. Just try it out already. Okay. Minato nodded vigorously, then began channeling chakra into the kunai. In just a moment, both blades lit up with a bluish glow. The chakra extended along their edges, forming blades that stretched out another 20 centimeters or so. Hayata let out an approving laugh. Now try swinging it, throw the chakra outward. Minato instinctively swung one, and a streak of light slashed toward the side, leaving a clean mark across the forge's surface. I'm sorry. Minato panicked upon seeing the damage. But Hayata just waved it off. No big deal. These kunai were forged from chakra-conductive metal mixed with wind element ore. You can extend chakra to create a cutting edge, or swing it to release a chakra slash. He winked at the two of them. The more chakra you pour in, the stronger the effect. If you had enough chakra, you could probably make the slash the size of a mountain. Too bad I didn't have any fire or lightning element materials on hand, or I could have made your second kunai with a different elemental effect. This is already amazing. Minato beamed, clutching his new weapons. Uncle Hayata, you're incredible. Haha, of course, I'm going to be the greatest smith in the land. He laughed heartily, then turned to Yuki and handed him the tachi. You described something between a straight sword and a katana, so I made this based on your specs. You told me your chakra affinities were wind and water, right? Right. Yuki nodded. They'd both tested their chakra natures as soon as they learned how to refine it. Minato had wind, fire, and lightning. Yuki had wind and water, fairly balanced. I blended wind and water minerals in just the right ratio, Hayata explained. And I used my family's traditional forging technique. This sword can channel both elements. I also customized it to your size and designed it to lengthen with chakra, so you won't outgrow it later. He stood proudly with his hands on his hips. According to Uncle Hayata, once chakra was infused into the blade, the originally short length would instantly extend. So cool, Saisui remarked with genuine admiration, glancing at Uncle Hayata. Your craftsmanship is amazing, old man. If you didn't always deny being a master smith, I'd swear you already were one. Ha ha ha, you're too kind, Hayata chuckled, scratching his head in embarrassment. I'm still a long way from being a master smith. I followed your specs exactly. Try it out, see if it suits you. Saisui nodded. Though only 6 years old, Constant training and a well-fed upbringing made him a bit taller and sturdier than other kids his age. Once the blade extended, it reached up to his chest while standing upright before him. Thankfully, the hilt was long enough for him to wield it as a two-handed sword. As Saisui channeled chakra into it, the blade shimmered with a bluish glow, especially around the cutting edge, where a cold light flickered ominously. He glanced around, trying to find something suitable to test the blade on. But in a blacksmith's shop, there wasn't much other than iron blocks and tools. Noticing Saisui's intent, Uncle Hayata brought out an iron rod as thick as a calf and planted it firmly in an open space. "Try this. I prepared it just for you two," he said, glancing toward Minato. That spiky-haired blonde had barely used it, just managed to punch a hole into his forge. Seeing Hayata's look, Minato scratched his head sheepishly. But Saisui ignored their silent exchange. Holding the blade in both hands, its blue glow intensifying, he swung it down at the iron pillar. It felt like slicing through paper, no resistance whatsoever as the blade passed cleanly through. Hiss. Saisui inhaled sharply. He hadn't expected the blade to be this powerful. With this sword, his combat power had at least doubled, if not tripled. "I didn't do anything fancy to this blade," Hayata explained. "Just tweak the materials and forging process a bit. Now it channels chakra more smoothly and can extend its length." Language resources. As for how powerful it becomes from here on, that's entirely up to you. He paused, then quickly added, perhaps worried Saisui would find it lacking. "Of course, you can unleash slash waves with it. And the potential for developing new abilities with this weapon is basically limitless." That part he said a bit uncertainly. After all, any chakra-conductive metal weapon could unleash chakra slashes, nothing too special there. But Saisui didn't mind. As long as it worked, he was satisfied. Even without built-in abilities, the sword could conduct two chakra natures and change length, that alone qualified it as a divine weapon. Besides, who said abilities couldn't be added later? Wind for cutting, water for impact, there were endless possibilities. He glanced at the iron pillar, now cleanly sliced in half. Then, sliding the blade back into its sheath, he lowered his stance, preparing for a draw strike. Iajutsu. Water severing strike. The instant he uttered the name, the sword flashed from its sheath, and 2/3 of Saisui's chakra vanished in a blink. The blade was now wrapped in a faint, barely visible mist of water. Just before striking the iron pillar again, the mist parted to reveal a thin layer of wind chakra along the blade's edge, like a hidden fang. As the sword made contact, water surged from the edge and spread across the pillar's surface, locking it in place. Then that water pulled, wrapping around the pillar like a rope, drawing it toward the sword edge. One force pushed while the other pulled. What had felt like cutting tofu earlier now felt like slicing through air, utterly frictionless. There was no resistance, no feedback. It was as if he hadn't hit anything at all. With a soft click, the blade returned to its sheath. Saisui wiped non-existent sweat from his forehead and muttered, creating water flow on land is exhausting. Water-style jutsu on solid ground consumed far more chakra than in natural water, and the effect was often weaker too. He glanced at the still stunned Minato and Hayata. A small grin crept onto his lips. This technique, he got the idea from a game back in his previous life. Water flow beheading. Encase the target's body part in water, then drag it toward the blade. A move that made enemies essentially offer themselves up. To top it off, the blade was covered with wind chakra to amplify cutting power. The technique was flashy, but expensive in terms of chakra. Saisui shook his head slightly. Too flashy for long battles. Saisui, that move was amazing. Minato cheered from the side, his eyes sparkling like stars. Clearly, he was impressed. But, water flow beheading, sounds kinda weird. He then straightened up, put on a serious face, and declared, why not call it, Super Flying Swallow Stealth Gale Phase Flow Slash, Style 1. I know your naming sense is weird, but could you not be this weird? No, water flow beheading, is better. Saisui shot down Minato's suggestion without hesitation, and, effective immediately, revoked his naming rights forever. But that name sounds so cool. Hugging his sword, Saisui ignored Minato's whining and turned to Hayata. Uncle, we'll be heading off now. We'll drop by again when we need more. Sure. Come by anytime, Saisui, Hayata replied with a smile. Then he gave Minato a little gesture. You too, Minato. Got it. Minato grinned brightly. We definitely will. As they walked down the street, Minato kept staring at his kunai like it was some priceless artifact. Well, for him, it was a treasure. His very first ninja tool. You know you can admire it at home, right? Saisui said flatly, hugging his sword with a sigh. This is our first ninja tool. Minato said with a weird expression, glancing over. Aren't you excited? Of course I am. Saisui responded confidently, quickening his pace. But no matter how excited you are, save it for home. Otherwise, people on the street will think we're idiots. He gestured for Minato to look around. He had never been the center of so much attention before. Seeing Minato hasten his steps to keep up, Saisui teased him, so you do know how to get embarrassed. Minato blushed even harder and followed behind him in silence. Just then, Akamichi Chose's voice rang out from behind them. Minato, Saisui, what a coincidence. The two turned to see the usual trio jogging toward them. We were just about to head to your place, Chose said, raising the basket he was holding. What a pain, Nara Shikaku muttered lifelessly, also carrying a basket. Come on, Shikaku. Auntie only means well, Yamanaka Inoichi said with a resigned smile, holding his own basket. We've already prepped the ingredients, he added with a grin. Where are we headed for this picnic? Saisui leaned over to see what they'd brought. What's this? He asked curiously, pointing at something in Shikaku's basket. Shikaku looked over and replied indifferently, venison. You know my family raises deer. We had some at home, so I brought it. Saisui nodded thoughtfully. Alright, let's head to the Naka River. He hugged his sword to his chest, looking very much like a wandering swordsman. Naka River. Shikaku blinked, then said cautiously, that's Uchiha territory. Anime and manga. Not that part, Saisui corrected. Don't forget, Konoha was built right next to the Naka River. I found a nice spot last time, secluded, full of fish. Best of all, it's not too far from the village, and we won't be disturbed. Hearing that they weren't going near the Uchiha, Shikaku sighed in relief. After all, the Uchiha clan wasn't exactly on good terms with the village. Recently, Uchiha Setsuna, the one who'd attempted to assassinate the second Hokage, had just been released. Going anywhere near their compound now would be reckless. Thankfully, that wasn't the plan. Let's go. Choza took the lead, striding off confidently, only to be tugged back by Saisui. Wrong way. This way, Saisui said, helplessly redirecting him and taking the lead himself. Sure. Saisui nodded cheerfully. He hadn't played chess in years, but he still remembered the basics. No way was he going to lose to this pineapple-headed guy. The two chatted as they walked ahead, while Choza handed Minato a bag of snacks and glanced curiously at the tri-pronged kunai in his hand. Anime and manga. Minato, were you guys making ninja tools? Minato nodded with a bright smile. Yeah, Saisui and I both forged some new weapons. We'll show you on the training field later. Cool, cool, Choza nodded nonchalantly. He had plenty of ninja tools himself but chose not to say anything to avoid making Minato feel bad. After all, he considered Minato and Saisui true friends, among the rare few who didn't make fun of his size. And they were classmates, too, seated right in front of him. Soon, the group arrived at the spot Saisui had mentioned. This place is seriously out of the way, Inoichi remarked. If it weren't, we wouldn't have it all to ourselves, Shikaku replied. From what Saisui had told them, this place was isolated but close to the river, likely to be a mess. And sure enough, the moment they arrived, they saw leaves scattered all over the ground. Leave it to me. Saisui grinned. Forming hand signs, he puffed up his cheeks and shouted. Wind style. Great breakthrough. With a sharp gesture, he blew a powerful gust of wind that sent the leaves flying off in the opposite direction. Everyone gasped. You already learned ninjutsu, someone exclaimed. Impressive, Shikaku said, laying out a mat on a clear patch of ground. Inoichi and Choza began unpacking the ingredients from their baskets and started prepping the food with practiced teamwork and efficiency. Seeing them so busy, Minato didn't join in but instead said, I'll go gather firewood nearby. I'll leave things here to you guys. Anime and manga. Got it. The three responded in unison as Minato ran off into the woods. Really now? Saisui shook his head. There were trees everywhere. He could have just cut off some branches. But Minato had to run off to collect firewood. Good thing I came prepared. Seeing everyone occupied, Saisui took out several steel wires from his pack. I can use these to make a grill. While the others worked, he chopped a few thick branches and used the wires to build a makeshift barbecue rack. By the time they were finally done, it was nearly noon. Shikaku collapsed onto the ground with a sigh. Why did I even come out here for a picnic? Munch. Choza tilted the last of a snack bag into his mouth. Weren't you the one who said, please, let me join your training? He said, imitating Shikaku's tone. Don't remind me. I want to go back in time and slap myself. But this place is great for fishing, Shikaku added, eyeing the sparkling water. The riverbank was calm, the water steady, and now and then, fish jumped from the surface. Saisui lay down beside Shikaku, staring at the tranquil water. I wish things could stay like this forever. I thought you wanted to become Hokage. Shikaku asked, surprised. Saisui chuckled and shook his head. You don't get it. If every day could be like this, I'd gladly give up on that dream. I want to become Hokage because I want to bring happiness to everyone. But if we're already this happy, then isn't that enough? So that's how it is, Sarutobi Hiruzen murmured as he put down the crystal ball, smoke curling from his pipe. To become Hokage, and bring happiness to others, that's a noble dream. Back at the riverbank, Saisui smirked. Ever since he walked into the blacksmith's shop earlier, he had sensed someone watching him. He wasn't sure who. It could have been the Anbu, or maybe even the Hokage. But this was Konoha. Most likely, it was that old geezer Sarutobi peering at him through his crystal ball. Saisui had been waiting all morning for the perfect moment to naturally say those words. Bet you didn't see that coming, old man. I was acting the whole time. Come on, we've been preparing all this time, wouldn't it be right not to enjoy the grilling process, he added. Nara Shikaku thought for a moment, then nodded and stood up too. By the afternoon, everyone lay sprawled on the grass, bellies full and content. Saisui rubbed his stomach and gazed up at the sky, so blue and untouched by industrial smog, and couldn't help but sigh. Choza, your cooking is amazing. Hee hee. Choza let out a sheepish laugh. It's nothing, really. My family runs a barbecue restaurant. I just picked up a few tricks from the shop. I'm still nowhere near the level of the real grill masters. No way, you're great. Minato gave him a thumbs up from nearby and praised, that was the best I've ever tasted. Praise about his cooking was always a surefire way to make Choza, a true foodie, smile with joy. After a while, lying there in the grass, Shikaku was the first to speak. So, time for training now. I told my family I was going out to train. That's the only reason they let me come. That's just because you're always slacking off, Yamanaka Inoichi chimed in with a helpless expression. Aunt Yoshino's just keeping you in check. What the heck? That's not fair. Shikaku shot back. I just like to sleep, that's all. Everything after that was conveniently framed as, I sleep to train better, being a ninja isn't something you can call laziness. The whole campsite was filled with cheerful, easygoing energy. Well then, let's get training. This time it was Saisui who spoke up. But a faint grin tugged at the corner of his lips as he quietly brushed his fingers along the hilt of his sword. After all, His duel mission for the day still hadn't been completed. How about we test our strength a bit? Saisui asked with a mischievous smile. Shikaku stared at his gleaming expression and felt something was off, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what. Sure. Inoichi agreed readily. I've been wanting to see how strong you really are, Saisui. As he spoke, he cracked his knuckles. Are we doing one-on-one? Nope. You three versus me and Minato. A fair 2v3 match. With that, Saisui activated the duel arena. Choza and Shikaku, who had entered it before, didn't react much, but Inoichi's eyes widened slightly in surprise as he looked around. This is the special Kekkei space. Inoichi muttered. Let's do one warm-up match first. The three looked at each other, then Shikaku said, you two better be careful. Even though they'd just started at the Ninja Academy, the Ino Shika Cho trio were from clans renowned for their secret techniques. They'd been soaking in herbal baths since infancy and refining chakras since they were 3. Though they hadn't fully mastered their clan techniques, they were already capable of using them in combat. Saisui and Minato exchanged a glance, and both saw a flicker of excitement in the other's eyes. For Saisui, it meant he could now complete his daily duel arena mission. For Minato, it was the thrill of finally having ninja tools and the chance to test them in real combat. Then let's begin. With a thought from Saisui, a countdown appeared in midair. As soon as the countdown hit 0, Minato charged forward, holding his triple-bladed kunai in reverse grip. Inoichi immediately formed a hand seal, using mind-body switch technique to link the trio's thoughts. Shikaku moved to control his shadow, aiming to restrain Minato. A perfect opportunity. Seeing this, Saisui's eyes lit up and he dashed straight toward Inoichi. The Ino Shika Cho trio was not to be underestimated, even though he and Minato had only recently crafted their chakra tools and grown significantly stronger. These three clans had cooperated since the Warring States era. They had been training in coordination for generations. Even at just 6 years old, with the help of their clans, their teamwork was already razor sharp. Still, Saisui smirked. Inoichi couldn't move while activating his secret technique. I won't let you through. Choza stepped in to block Saisui's charge. He was the trio's offense and defense, while Shikaku was the brain. Saisui wasn't surprised, as if he'd expected it all along. Iajutsu. Water-severing strike. In the next instant, he unsheathed his blade. No feints, just a clean slash aimed at Choza's neck. The blade wasn't fast, but Choza had just thrown a punch and had no time to dodge. Choza, dodge to your left. Shikaku's voice rang out in his mind. Choza didn't hesitate and immediately shifted sideways. But it didn't help. Saisui's blade was shrouded in a mist of water that clung to Choza and pulled him back toward the edge of the slash. Mind-body switch. Just then, Inoichi's jutsu activated. With Choza's head tilted slightly, the attack trajectory changed and shot toward Saisui. Language resources. Trickery. Saisui shifted his body and narrowly dodged the attack, but that moment of distraction weakened the binding effect of his Aqua Sever technique on Choza. Now's our chance. Shikaku's voice rang in Choza's mind. Hit him with a full power punch to the chest. Choza broke free of the water binding and hurled a powerful punch at Saisui's chest. In that moment, the long blade suddenly shifted, and with one clean swing, Saisui severed Choza's arm. But the punch still landed squarely on Saisui's chest, knocking the wind out of him and making him cough up blood. Both of them staggered back. Choza, are you okay? Shikaku's voice was anxious. Even though he knew there'd be no lasting injuries inside the duel arena, seeing Choza's arm get sliced off made his heart race. Sorry. My attack missed. It's okay. Don't worry. Even at their young age, they'd been taught never to give up easily. Choza reassured the two of them. Though his arm had been severed, he felt no pain. Instead, his fighting spirit surged. Maybe he always looked silly, always munching on snacks, but that was just the surface. Choza looked at Saisui. The three of them had thought the two opponents might cause a little trouble, but now they realized they had underestimated them. Saisui wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, slid his blade back into its sheath, and grinned. As expected, you guys aren't to be taken lightly. Let's go again. Bring it. Choza charged at Saisui again, but this time, Saisui smiled and began forming hand seals. Wind style. Vacuum sphere.